Om. ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं कर्वावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः ॐ सदाशिवसमारम्भाम् शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम् ॐ गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णुः गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरु साक्षात् परं ब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः ॐ सरस्वती नमस्तुभ्यं वरदे कामरूपिणि विद्यारम्भं करिष्यामि सिद्धिर्भवतु मे सदा कार्पण्यदोषोपहता स्वभावः पृच्छामि त्वां धर्मसम्मूढचेताः यश्रेयस्यानिश्चितं ब्रूहि तन्मे शिष्यस्तेऽहं शाधि मां त्वां प्रपन्नम् ॐ वाङ्मे मनसि प्रतिष्ठिता मनो मे वाचि प्रतिष्ठितम् आविर्मयेधि वेदस्य म आणिस्थः श्रुतं मे मा प्रहासिः अनेन अधीतेन अहोरात्रान् सन्दधामि ऋतं वदिष्यामि सत्यं वदिष्यामि तन्मावतु तद्वक्तारम् अवतु मां वक्तु वक्तारम् अवतु वक्तारम् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः ॐ भद्रं कर्णेभिः शृणुयाम देवाः भद्रं पश्येम अक्षभिर्यजत्राः स्थिरैरङ्गे सुष्ठुवाग्वं स्वस्तनूभिः व्यशेम देवहितं यदायुः स्वस्ति न इन्द्रो वृद्धश्रवाः स्वस्ति न पूषा विश्ववेदाः स्वस्ति नस्तार्क्ष्यो अरिष्टनेमिः स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्दधातु ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः ॐ अहं वृक्षस्य रेरिव कीर्तिपृष्ठं गिरेरिव ऊर्ध्वपवित्रो वाजिनीव स्वामृतम् अस्मि द्रविणत्वं सवर्चसं सुमेधा अमृतोक्षुतः इति त्रिशङ्कुर्वेदानुवचनम् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः नारायण नारायण today we start with the chapter 15. So chapter 15 chapter 15 is the last chapter. So we know we are in the Gyan Shatak, right? The first 6 chapters were about the Karma, which is all about Chitta Shuddhi, supposed to help us cleanse ourselves from inside, right? The next 6 chapters, the next Shatak is about Bhakti, Upasana, which is all about Chitta, like being able to focus or concentrate our mind and also expand our mind, right? So Chitta Shuddhi and then Chit Ekagrata. And then we come to the last part, where once we have cleansed ourselves and we've achieved the concentration, ability to focus, we've expanded our mind beyond the sansar, then we become eligible to receive the gyan. So the last shatak is the gyan yoga. And the 13th and the 14th chapters gave us the uh, prime philosophies of the Upanishads. And chapter 15, which is the smallest chapter in the Shatak, only 20 shlokas, it's the last chapter which deals with the philosophy, right? So this is the last chapter where we will understand the deepest gyan, the deepest philosophy of the Upanishads. In fact, by itself, alone, if you read just this one chapter out of the three shataks, in this one chapter, the entire uh, synopsis, the entire summary of the Vedas, of the Upanishads, is encapsulated in this one chapter. And that is why it's an extremely important chapter, even though it is the smallest, extremely important chapter, and is often used at the time of Parayan, at the time the body leaves the coil. This is one of the chapters that is read, right? In fact, if this is the only chapter that is read, it is enough, right? If we really understand this chapter well, that's how important this last chapter is. Now, so now that we've understood the importance of this chapter, uh, the chapter is basically, it has three parts to it, right? The first part essentially deals with, and that's why now you understand with these three parts, you'll understand why this chapter is the summary of all the Upanishads in the world. The first part talks about the description of the sansar. Okay? So it gives us an explanation of how the sansar is, what are the characteristics, main characteristics of the sansar. And this description is provided from a point of view that once we really understand the sansar, we will develop vairagya towards it, right? With the help of our vivek, with the help of our wisdom, with the help of our intellect, we will be able to develop vairagya, detachment to this world. Now, once you've understood it, then the question is, how do I develop this detachment, right? So then Bhagwanji in this chapter provides us with the primary and secondary ways to develop that detachment. And finally talks about, once you know कि संसार से निवृत्ति कैसे होती है, then it will talk about how or what you will achieve at the end of, right? What is the achievement at the end of that, at the end of this understanding and development of the vairagya, development of the detachment, right? That is why this chapter by itself is enough at the time of Parayan. Okay, this is one of the three chapters that is recommended that when you start off with Gita, learn the shlokas. Right? Chapter 3 was the first one, chapter 12 was the second one, and chapter 15 is the third one. After this, there is no more philosophy, right? In the first 13 chapter, 13, 14, 15 are the three chapters which really encapsulate the philosophy as such, right? So 13th, we understood Kshetra and Kshetragya, right? We understood that there are two completely different entities, Kshetra and Kshetragya, the field and the farmer. And we understood that there is, that while they are two distinct entities, Parayana, Paraprakriti and all, we are constantly confused and we think that they are the same. So then in the next one, we understood the philosophy behind why do we think that they are one? What causes this delusion? What causes this confusion? So we, really dove deep into the three gunas. Now the same philosophy is now taken one step forward, but it's like concluding the whole thing together, or almost. Philosophy will be concluded in a very holistic fashion in this chapter. And here, there are new terms that will get introduced. And in this one, basically the farmer, the kshetragya, the knower of the field, is now called the Purushottam, the best of the best. He is the most uttam, he is the most perfect Purush, right? He is also called the Akshar Purush, that which cannot be Kshar, that which cannot be destroyed. Kshar Purush is the word referred to here for the word field. the kshetra, the field, is now here called the Kshar Purush, the Jivatma. And then we use the word Akshar Purush or the Purushottam to refer to the Kshetragya. And hence this chapter is called the Purushottam Yoga. And at the start of this chapter, we'll see when he starts the description, Krishna uses the simile of a people tree. When he describes the nature of the world, he'll use the simile of the people tree, Ashwath tree, to describe the characteristics of the world. Now, why did he choose specifically tree? And that's because people tree, people in chapter 10, he had in chapter 10 in Shloka 26, he had said that of all, when he was talking about his vibhutis, right? He had told us that of all the trees, I am Ashwatham Vrishana. Of all the vriksh, of all the trees, I am Ashwath. Because Ashwath or the people tree is the best tree of all. Why is it the best tree of all? Because every part of people tree can be used for some seva of the world. Every aspect of people tree is constantly in seva of the world. It has medicinal properties and is used for the benefit of this world. So he calls himself, he compares himself to the Ashwath, right? Remember the Vibhuti Yoga, where we compared ourselves to best of the best in every class, he told us, right? The extraordinary in every class, he said that I am this amongst this particular class, right? So he uses the Ashwath tree as an example. And when you use something as an example or a similar simile to understand something else, there must exist some similarities between the two, right? That's why you would use it to understand something else, right? So he is going to describe the characteristics through those similarities, and there are 10 main similarities. So we'll dwell deeper into that description of the people tree going forward. All right. So with that background, we will now start the 15th chapter. Smita, can you start with us? I'll say the first two phrases and then you start. Okay.
Okay.
And you repeat after me, right? Om Shri Paramatmane Namaha.
Om Shri Paramatmane Namaha.
अथ दशमो पंचमो अध्यायः.
अथ दशमो पंचो अध्यायः.
Correct. अथ दश पंचमो अध्यायः.
अथ दश पंचमो अध्यायः.
Now you can start.
Purushottam Yoga, the yoga of the Supreme Entity. Introduction. The entity which was named the field in chapter 13 will now in this chapter be called Shara Purusha, or the mutable entity, as it is ever-changing and insentient. The entity named the farmer in chapter 13 will be called the Akshara Purusha, or the immutable entity, which is never-changing and is sentient. The former denotes insentient nature, and the latter the sentient individualized self, or Jivatma. The supreme absolute self is even subtler than the sentient. He is thus superior to both and is therefore called the supreme entity or Purushottama. In this chapter, the Lord gives us an exposition of the supreme entity, and so this chapter is named the Yoga of the Supreme Entity. Should I?
Yeah.
Connection. The Lord compares the world to an inverted people tree, which has branches below and has its root above.
So, para and apara prakriti, sentient nature and the insentient nature. Insentient nature, the para prakriti, the maya, which is also him, and then the sentient nature, the consciousness principle, the sat chit anand. That is the apara prakriti. Okay, and he is saying that he is even beyond the para and apara prakriti. He is the Purushottama. All right. Now he's going to give us that exposition, the understanding of the characteristics of the sansar. And when we read this, read it from the perspective of why is he describing the sansar to us again here. Okay, from a philosophical point of view, he's explaining the characteristics of sansar so that we can develop detachment towards it. Ultimately, this whole description is towards us to understand that there is no point in being attached to this world, and it's better for me to change my desire for the material world into desire for the Vanchi. For me to be able to transcend my rag dvesh. The rag still remains, but the rag for the material world will eventually, through this knowledge, through this understanding, will convert into anurag for the Lord. Okay, that's the reason why he's explaining. So with that understanding, let's try and understand this chapter, but keep that at the point at the back of your mind. Bhagyashree, will you read the next one with us?
Yes.
Shri Bhagavan
Shri Bhagavanuvacha
Urdhva Madha Shakham
Urdhva Mula Madha Shakham
Ashwatham Prahuravyayam
Ashwatham Prahuravyayam
Chandasi Yasya Parnani
Chandansi Yasya Parnani
Yastam Veda Sa Vedavid.
Yastam Veda Savedavit. The Lord says, the world as Ashwath, people tree, with its roots above and branches below, is spoken of as imperishable. Vedas are its leaves, and one who comprehends its reality is indeed an adept in Vedas. The world as an inverted tree. In this shloka, the world has been compared to the Ashwath or people tree. Every part of the people tree has medicinal properties and is used in life-saving drugs in the Ayurvedic system. This is one reason why the Lord says in Shloka 26 of chapter 10 that he is Ashwath amongst trees. The world is like such a tree, green and laden with leaves. It is a large tree with a very long life. It appears to be eternal, but all the time changes keep on taking place in it, on account of which old leaves are shed and new leaves keep on appearing, giving it a look of permanence. Similarly, the old bark keeps on peeling off and a fresh one takes its place. Fresh flowers bloom and fresh fruits appear in place of faded flowers and fallen fruits. The overall effect is that the same tree appears to be continuing for long. Ultimately, new seeds are formed, which give rise to fresh trees. This cycle of seeds from tree and trees from seeds goes on forever. Similar is the case with the world. Even though it gives an appearance of permanence, changes keep on taking place in it continually. This is why there can be no enduring involvement with this impermanent world. The tree of the world is said to have its root above, as it springs from the Supreme Self, who, being transcendent, is traditionally regarded as residing above all. From the Supreme Self, Brahma, the Creator, appears as the main trunk, from which innumerable branches emerge in the shape of physical forms. Even though it does not remain unchanged for a moment, it continues to appear everlasting. This is why it is said to be imperishable. The leaves provide nourishment to the tree. In the same manner, the Vedas nourish the eternal appearances of the world. The entire phenomenal world obeys the rules of the Vedas, which lay down inexorable and inviolable principles governing it. The Lord says that one who is well versed in the principles that govern the phenomenal world is the knower of the Vedas.
Okay, so here the world is compared to a tree, uh, a tree that is inverted. Okay, So you have roots on top, then you have trunk, and then you have many branches with like hundreds of thousands of millions of leaves, and the trunk, the secondary roots that come out of it, the secondary roots, the vines, they come down. Okay, that's the visualization of the people tree, the tree of life, as he is describing this. Now, why is he one? So one of the biggest, one of the characteristics which is same between the tree, the people tree, and the sansar is that there is vastness of bondage, vastness of bondage. महत्ता है bondage की. Uh, and the tree, this people tree, is supremely widespread, right? And it creates bondages through those vines that come, right? Similarly, in this world, every single relationship that we have, it will create bondages. Relatives in Hindi are called bandhu. Bandhu because वो बांधते हैं. They create bondages, right? Even though you may have a relative sitting in Chicago, but if something happens there, it will affect you, right? So that is why the way a widespread a people tree is widespread in nature and creates bondages. Similarly, this world creates bondages, right? That's one very important thing. The second thing is that this world is like the people tree is anadi, right? So if you ask yourself, and this is a question that has been asked before in the class, right? Why was I created? Why was this world created? If you ask, why is this janam that I have right now? The answer would be, oh, you have this life because of the karmas of the past life. Then you're like, okay, so when was the life before this created? So the jan before this, right? So that was the result of the life before that, right? So you can continue to go down, and then you're like, okay, so when was the first current created, right? There is no answer to this because the way the world, the way Bhagwanji is anadi with no beginning. Bhagwanji is with no beginning. His power, Maya, is also anadi with no beginning. You will get no answer to that question. Similarly, Ashwath tree also appears to be anadi, right? It is evergreen. It does not shed its leaves forever. It is evergreen. In all seasons, it remains green. So you see it, and it has an extraordinarily long life. So from a point of view of us humans, it seems eternal. It always seems like it's always been there. It was there when I was born. It will be there when I die, right? So the people tree looks eternal. This sansar looks eternal. However, even though it has the appearance of eternal, there is a continuous destruction that goes on within the sansar. There is impermanence, even though it feels permanent. So similarly, the Ashwath tree has the same concept, right? The leaves are constantly falling off and new leaves are taking its place. New branches are continuously growing. New vines are constantly growing. The fruits come, they decay, they fall off. New fruits take its place. So the tree is never the same. Second to second to second to second, it is continuously changing as the tree, and despite that impermanence, it has that feeling of permanence. Similarly, this world, it feels as if it is permanent to us. It feels very real to us, right? Despite the fact that it is absolutely impermanent and it is constantly ever changing. It's violently changing, in fact, at all points of time, right? So that is a second thing that is similar to it. The third thing, the way he describes it, is that see, the way a tree is sustained by its invisible roots, right? You see the tree, you don't really see the roots which are underground. It is the invisible roots that will sustain the tree. It is the dharta. So the trees are the dharta, the roots are the dharta, the sustainer of the visible tree. Similarly, the trees here, the roots here are likened to the Lord. He is the root of this tree, right? He is the root through which the tree of the sansar, the Maya, his power, is sustained. So Lord is the sustainer. You give water to the roots of the tree, not to the branches, not to the leaves, not to the fruits. Keep the tree growing. You water the roots, right? That's where you give the sustenance. You give khad, manure to the roots. Similarly, in our life, we should be watering, we should be giving all sustenance to the root of the sansar, which is Bhagwan Ji. Instead, हम लोग क्या करते हैं? We keep watering the leaves, we keep watering the branches, and then we wonder why it is not growing well, right? The tree of our life. So we need to constantly remember that this tree of life for each one of us and for this the holistic tree of this world is sustained by Bhagwanji. So we should always be nurturing the roots, the invisible roots, the invisible Bhagwanji that sustains this world. Okay? Then comes the trunk of the tree. The trunk of the tree is from where everything else sprouts, right? So it takes the sustenance from the roots, and from there it gives all of this away to everything else, to the branches, to the trees, to the fruits, to the flowers. So this is the creator, the Brahma, the Rajogun, the Rajogun that emanates from the Narayan, from the absolute, from that Brahma, which then finally gives which gives appearance of the tree eventually. So the Rajogun, the Brahma, the creator, is the trunk. Then the tree has many branches, right? And there are three, the branches can go downwards, they can go upwards, or they can be parallel, right? So this is similar to the three gunas, the satogun, the rajogun, the tamogun. And the ascendancy of each of these gunas then describes which is our what is the form that we take. So we can take, if there is satoguna on the ascendancy, then the branches go upwards, and those are the forms that we take in which are the seven upper realms, the gandharvas, the kinnars, the devas, right? So those are the branches that go upwards. And then if the Rajogun is on the ascendancy, then the form that Jivatma takes is that of a human being, right? So you come in the Bhutal. And if the Tamogun is on the ascendancy, then the branches go down. And those are the forms that we take in the form of various animals, insects, vegetation. Okay? So those are the various branches of the trees, the different forms of the different forms of the of life. And then there are millions and millions of small leaves. These leaves are what? These leaves are the ones that are responsible for continuation of life. They are the ones that absorb, they do photosynthesis, they create food, which eventually gets converted into flowers and fruits, right? So these leaves have been likened to the Vedas. What actually, so it's not really just Vedas. What it really means is it refers to the Karma Kand in Vedas, the karmas that we do, because it is the karmas that will eventually bear fruit. So these leaves are the plethora of karmas. Now, whether we do the scripture sanctioned karma, the karma that is given here, or we do non-sanctioned karma, okay, which will then create the lower forms of life, right? But these leaves will create the karmas, will then eventually lead to the fruits, and fruits will have seeds, which will then again create further trees, further branches, further sustenance, continuation of life. So that's how, that is the nature of this world. The nature of the world is like that of this tree, right? And the fruits on this tree depend on the type of karma that has been created. So the fruits can be sweet, the fruits can be sour or bitter, or the fruits can be bittersweet, right? So depending on the karma that we have done. And wherever there are trees with which are laden with fruits, you will see lots and lots of birds come there, right? And the birds then eat those fruits. And the birds make a lot of noise. There's color up, right? It's a very noisy tree. And who are these birds? These birds are the jivas who come and eat these fruits, right? On these branches, which describe which realm we are in. All these birds sit on these different trees and they eat the fruit. They eat the pleasure, they experience the pleasure, the bhokta. The bhokta will come and they will experience the pleasure and the pain. And there's a lot of noise, either because of laughter when you're experiencing pleasure, or there are violent cries when there is pain. So it's a very noisy tree of sansar, right? Um, and then just the way the tree will move with the flow of the wind, right? Wherever the wind blows, the tree will sway with it. Similarly, this sansar is going to move as per the prarabdha. So our own trees, individual trees, we sway with the current. The current will take us to various parts, right? You move from Bangalore to Delhi to Assam to Singapore to Chicago to wherever, right? The current take us. The prarabdha our prarabdha of the current will take us. We flow with it. Similarly, the collective prarabdha of all the jivas create the direction with which the world flows. And we flow with it as helpless creatures. We are just flowing with that prarabdha. We don't have choice in that manner anymore. Once the prarabdha is there, we have no choice but to experience that prarabdha. Right? So we flow with it. Now, but and then we talked about how this tree or the sansar is anadi, yet and yet it is impermanent. Correct? It is impermanent. It is constantly changing, ever changing. It's transient. So this is through appropriate karma, through appropriate gyan, it is possible to cut this tree from its trunk, which is the Rajoguni trunk, right? We can cut this tree one by one by one, blow by blow by blow. And what is the axe that you can use to cut this tree? That axe is that of Vairagya. Now, for us to cut this tree, we need this axe of Vairagya. But Vairagya comes from Vivek first. You have to have the Vivek, the wisdom, to understand the nature of this tree, the wisdom to understand why I need not have my sustenance from this impermanent world. That wisdom then that creates that it creates detachment from this world rather than being involved in it and constantly like rolling with the pleasures and pain. It gives us the buddhi, the wisdom, the vivek to be able to become equanimous with the dualities and the opposites of the world. We learn to suffer in happiness, right? We learn to become okay with the pace of life and become okay with the prarabdha. We are okay with the wind that blows, rather than trying to constantly change the things as they come. And when we do that, then it gives us space in our mind to actually finally spend time and energy in the Brahma Vichar. Actually, at that stage, we start to inquire about the Lord. Only in that stage. So we need Vivek. With that Vivek comes Vairagya. With Vairagya, we can cut asunder this tree of the sansar, which keeps us in this world, right? I think I've covered pretty much everything.
So there's one thing I think she's covered a lot and she's done a pretty good job. But just two things I'd like to highlight. One is, yeah, the root is the source of everything the tree is. And like Tuhina said, the root is Bhagwan Ji. The other way to look at this is the roots are the principles with which we live our lives. It's the Gita principles. And the root is always hidden, but its expression you can see in its tree. right? So the principles that we follow, the principles that we implement, the bhav with which we do any something, all of that is always hidden. It is not always visible, but our entire focus has to be working from the root, not from the external sansaric ways of doing things, right?
And at all times, with all your actions, try and give the sustenance to that root alone. Water that root all the time.
Correct.
Right? And first, water your own roots. Get in touch with your own Bhagwanji. Focus on your own principles. Only then you can water the roots of other trees in our care. The smaller trees, our children, or people in our community, our friends, our parents. All of that happens secondly. First, you have to water your own roots and be in touch with that. If that is not sustained and your own tree is withering away, you can't help others.
The second thing I wanted to highlight is this tree, this people tree, right? It's very, as you have said, it's very larger than life. It's massive with like hundreds of branches and vines that come down, the roots and underground. Some of them are so old that come up overground as well. So there is a level, it seems like it's permanent. Every day you go, you will see that it seems permanent. But logically, you and I both know it is constantly changing. Leaves are constantly growing old, new leaves are coming, fruits, all of those things, right? So this illusion is because of the gunas, and that is what our illusion with the world is. Even though we know it is all impermanent, even though we know everything is temporary, even though we know we all will at some point leave this body, we know everything is temporary. There is no question about it. Nobody is questioning that. Yeah, I will live forever. No, all of us know we have a life for only 30, 40, 50, 60 years. But yet the illusion of guna is so strong that we deal with things as if it's permanent. We deal with the situation or a DDGP in such a way that we take it to heart. Aise kaise? Why this to me? Right? And that's the same illusion that we need to cut, as Lina had mentioned, with the vairagya, which is dispassion towards sansar. And the third thing is uh, the invert. Why is this tree inverted? Right? Why couldn't it be highlighted the way it is? The reason that it's inverted is because even in an organizational chart or a family chart, right? CEO is on top and the organization is down. What happens in the top flows downward, and that was always easy for us to understand, right? So even in the inverted tree, it's very easy for us to now understand if we focus on the principles and the roots, it will flow downward to everything else. And that's where our mind needs to be. Yeah. Those are the three.
Vijay, you'll read with us the next one.
Yes. Describing other parts of the tree, the world, the Lord says,
Adhashchurva prasutasya shakhaha.
Adashoshvadam prashistasya
Adhashchurva prasutasya tas. Adhashchurva prasutastasya shakhaha.
Adaschotatya pratistha tashakaha.
We'll divide it up. Huh?
Yeah.
Adhashchurva.
Adarchodvam
Adhash Chordhva
Adarchodvam
Prasutastasya Shakhaha.
pratitasa shakaha.
Prasra Prasra
Prastra
Tastasya
tastasya
Shakha.
shakaha.
Guna Pravriddha Vishaya Pravalaha.
Guna pravidda vishaya pravalaha.
Adhascha mulanyanusantataani.
Adashcha
Mulanya
mulanya
nusantani.
santani. Mulanya santani.
Yeah, santatani.
Santani.
Karmanubandhini manushaloke.
Karmanu bandini manushya. The branches of the tree are spread in all directions, downward and upward, and nurtured by the gunas. Sense objects are their shoots, and the roots stretch forth below in the world of humans, binding the individualized self according to the action performed in human body. The world and the three gunas. The branches of the world tree extend in form of different species. These species are classified according to their degree of awareness into heavenly being, human being, animals, and vegetation. These branches are nurtured by the three gunas, meaning that thereby that different species of beings are result of motivated actions done in the past life. The degree of this awareness is dependent on the ascendancy of one guna over the other two. The sense objects are like the shoots, extending downwards, and these branches appears in form of various species of human beings, animals, birds, insects, and various classes of vegetation, and extending upwards they appear as mains, gods, Gandharvas, etc. Different actions can be compared to fruits, which give rise to the seeds of desires, cravings, affinities, and hatreds, from which more trees springing up. If the actions are motivated by worldly desires, they become roots of new cravings. This is why in Shloka, the roots of cravings are said to stretch up to the world of humans, as it is only in human form and that fresh actions can be performed. Other species are only subject to suffering or enjoying the results of action done in previous human lives.
So the roots that are being referred to here are those secondary roots, the vines that come down. And from there, they take grounding, and from there, further trees can crop up. Okay. And so these roots only extend into the world of humans. And as was written down here, right? That the branches are nurtured by three gunas, meaning that different species of beings are result of motivated actions done in the past life. Right? All the sakam karm that we have done result in us taking different birth forms, right? But this awareness, how aware you are about this fact, how aware you are of this cycle of karma bandhan, depends on what type of guna is on the ascendancy. If tamogun is on the ascendancy, there is no such understanding at all. And that's why all kinds of ignorant acts are performed, right? And the whole concept of YOLO arrives in that. Now, but the more Satogun is on the ascendancy, the more clearly you understand how this Kanbandhan cycle works. The more clearly it takes root in your consciousness, the deeper your intellect sharpens. The more sharpened your intellect is, the wiser you become in that understanding, the more dispassion arises in you, the more dispassion arises for this world, because now you start to really, really appreciate the reality of this world, the impermanence, the transience. You start to really understand what is real and what is unreal. So, what does it all depend on? The degree of this awareness is dependent on the ascendancy of the guna. If Satoguna is on the ascendancy, the higher that awareness. Okay. The rest, I think we really understood, right? The good visualization here is to understand that the craving, the desires we have, those desires become secondary roots, which then bind us more firmly into this world. There is no question, then we move to the next one. Lena, will you read with us? न रूपमस्येतत्
Describing the peculiarities of
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead. Connection.
describing the peculiarities of this tree of the world, the Lord says,
न रूपमस्येह तथोपलभ्यते
न रूपमस्येह प्रलभ्यते
नान्तो न चादिर्न च समप्रतिष्ठा
नान्तो न चादिर्न
संप्रतिष्ठा
संप्रतिष्ठा
अश्वत्थ
संप्रतिष्ठा
अश्वत्थमेनं सुविरूढमूलम्
अश्वत्थमेनं विरूढमूलम्
संगशस्त्रेण दृढेन छित्त्वा
संगशस्त्रेण दृढेन चित्वा.
ततः पदं
The
तत्
form of this tree as described. Okay.
ततः पदं
Yeah.
तत् परिमार्गितव्यम्
तथा पदं तत् परिमार्गतव्यम्
यस्मिन् गता न निवर्तन्ति भूयः
यस्मिन् गता न निवर्तन्ति भूयः
तमेव चाद्यं पुरुषं प्रपद्ये
तमेव चाद्यं पुरुषं प्रपद्ये
यतः प्रवृत्ति प्रसृता पुराणी
यतः प्रवृत्तिः प्रसृता पुराणी. The form of this tree, as described in the preceding shloka, cannot be perceived as such, nor has it an ending, an origin, or stability. Therefore, cutting asunder this firm-rooted Ashwatha tree with the strong implement of non-involvement, the state should be sought for attaining which none returns. And with the firm resolve, I stand dedicated to that primeval being from whom this eternal creation has sprung forth. The world without origin or stability. Shloka 3 states that on contemplation, the form of this world is perceived as being quite different from what it appears. A tree appears to be green all over and very attractive. Similarly, the world appears to be very attractive, but when studied closely, its attraction recedes like the water in a mirage, and they ultimately disappear into nothingness. It cannot be found out how the world began, nor can it be divined how it would end. Thirdly, this tree of the world has a unique feature. Though it is perceivable at all times, it keeps on changing all the time. This is why it is said to be devoid of any stability. Even then, generally, the belief of its existence is firmly rooted in the minds of persons in the same manner in which a tree is firmly rooted in the ground. To cut asunder this tree, or rather its notion, only the strong acts of non-involvement is effective. Cutting off the tree of the world does not mean destroying the houses and putting an end to people residing therein. It means rooting out the notion of existence of the world, which appears real without being so. The feeling that the world causes happiness or unhappiness is that wrong dream-like notion which can be removed by a strong sense of non-involvement. This sense can be developed while living in the world, doing all one's duties, but not expecting happiness from any person, happening, or circumstances of life. By this method alone can the notion of the world and not the world itself be ended with the acts of strong non-involvement. Non-involvement. This acts of non-involvement can be sharpened by having the conviction that the aim of human life is to attain self-realization and not material success in the ephemeral world. Clear determination of this aim of life gives strength to the sense of non-involvement. If the resolution is weak, non-involvement becomes shaky. Sometimes an unpleasant experience with some people or circumstances creates a feeling of hatred for them in the mind. This is not non-involvement at all. Non-involvement comes by not having any experience of happiness from anyone or from anything. Secondly, the axe of non-involvement has to be sharpened on the grinding stone of true realization so that the massive trunk of the tree of the world may be cut asunder. Dedication to the Lord. In Shloka 4, the Lord tells that after cutting asunder the tree of the world, the sights get set on the state of unending bliss. On reaching this state, there is no reversion to the world or to the cycle of births and deaths. This state is attained by cultivating the strong conviction that salvation lies in taking refuge in that supreme existence from whom the tree of the world has sprung from.
So, so basically, by Shloka 3, Bhagwanji has completed the description of the world, right? By explaining the reality of this world. Seems permanent, but is impermanent. And once a person, the whole idea of this description is that once people really understand it, at some point of time, some rare person will eventually say, you know what? Now that I understand it, I want to cut this bondage. I don't want to live in this bondage anymore. I want to get out. I want moksha, I want liberation from this continuous, cycle of life and death, from the suffering that I'm always seeing. Because and the fact that he understands that I, like right now, I understand that I am like this helpless creature that is constantly flowing in this river of prarabdha that I only have created, and I'm constantly being fed the pleasures and the fruits of the pleasures and the pains, and I'm either crying or I'm laughing, and I want to now I want to get out of this madness, right? So when that person says that now I want to get out of this bondage, what do I have to do? Then Bhagwanji tells us the sadhana. Then he tells us what is the sadhana to get out of this madness. And what does he tell us? He basically says that there are three main things you have to do. And as we go forward, we will learn a lot more. But essentially, he talks about three main things. The first thing we have to do is now that we understand that this world is so impermanent, we have to reduce our dependence on the world. If you want to cut your bondage from this world, you have to cut your dependence on the world, which means your dependence on the food for pleasure, your dependence on other people for your happiness, your relationships, your dependence on other people's acknowledgement of you, name, fame, from your role, your position, the happiness or sense of fulfillment you get from your job, a sense of fulfillment from the various roles you have created for yourself, right? That dependence has to go. And the dependence has to become that on the God only, the only permanent thing. Now, so that is the first thing. Cut your dependence from the world and convert it into dependence on God and God alone. Now, that does not mean that we go around telling the world, I don't need you, I don't need you. Go around telling your family and your relatives that, oh, yeah, I don't need you at all, right? That's not what is. Your vyavaharik jagat does not change. Your vyavahar in the world will, so it is not an external thing. It's an internal thing that mentally, whatever happens, you say, my only dependence is God, right? Something is coming from somebody, it is coming from God. If you're giving something to somebody, you're doing something for somebody, you're doing it for God, for with his resources, for him alone. That is the dependence you need to have. And when you have that sort of dependence, then you are no longer tied to people. You don't have expectations from people, right? You're not like no longer doing bidding of other people. If people are asking you to do something wrong that goes against the word, you don't have to do that anymore because you're not dependent on that person. He's not the one giving your salary. God alone is taking care of your sustenance. And if this salary stops, it is okay. God will sustain me. Maybe he wants me to go through a period where I need to cut down my desires and wants of this world, right? Whatever happens, happens because of God, and he alone will sustain me. He alone will give me the mental energy to do so. So that's the first thing. We have to develop dependence on Bhagwanji and cut away from the world. And then it is like, okay, so how do I then depend on God, right? So even though I don't know the nature of God, I can never know the nature of God, real nature of God, and who he is or how is he, but I can still create a relationship with my personal God, my Ishtadevta. Whatever is his form that connects to me, I develop my dependence on him and I talk to him and know that when I'm talking to him, I'm talking to the absolute Brahm, who I don't fully understand. But that's the beauty, that even though you talk to a form, your own Ishtadevta, in whatever form your mind conjures him up, that form alone will help you understand the final form of God. And he will connect you. Mentally know that you're connecting to him through this one form, right? Which is what we had talked in the last class as well, right? Then the second thing is that you have to learn. So first thing is reduce your dependence on the world, depend only on the God alone. Second, learn to accept the dualities of life, the opposites of life. When there is pleasure, there is going to be pain. If there is health, there is going to be sickness. If there is victory, there is going to be loss. Where there is going to be highs, there are going to be lows. There's going to be sun, there is going to be rain. We learn to be equanimous in all of that and not are constantly not chasing after solving for them. Run after astrologer. How do I resolve for this? How do I learn to change this position of my life? Whatever's coming, right? Stop constantly worrying about the opposites. Just the way a mosquito comes and stings you and you just brush it away and you don't keep dwelling into that little sting that happened. Take the vicissitudes of life similarly. Whether you are going through a patch of happiness, you're going through a patch of difficulty, in both situations, don't lose the equanimity of mind. Don't go mad with, in indulging your senses in the times of plenty. Similarly, don't traumatize and torment your mind through the suffering when there is a difficult period that comes through. Your senses will endure tap in those situations. You may not be able to sleep, you may not be able to get proper food, you may not be able to get proper rest. That tap may happen through a difficult situation. Don't torment yourself even in that situation of tap. Just as you don't, if there is plenty food, if you have a buffet in front of you, you don't go mad eating everything and then cause indigestion. So have temperance in both plenty and in times of scarcity. Both will come in our lives with our product. Accept them both with as prasad of Bhagwanji as with prasad buddhi, right? So that's the second thing. And why is this important? It is important because when we release our mind from constantly trying to say, oh, there is plenty, now how do I find ways to continue this plentifulness? Or when there is scarcity, I'm constantly employing my mind on how to get out of the scarcity, right? When we stop indulging our mind in that, because of the first one, my dependence is not on this world. Whatever is coming from Bhagwanji, and he will continue to sustain me through the world. He will find ways. He will send me resources as and when needed. When I have done that first and second, then what happens? then my mind space is created. There is space in my physical life, there is time available in my life, and there is space created in my mind for what? The most important thing which will help me get out of this bondage, Brahma Vichar. This time, this mind space is to be utilized to actually do an inquiry into the Lord, into the nature of the Lord, into the characteristics of the Lord, into figuring out how Lord is appearing in different forms in my life. How do I connect to Him? How do I find my own demons? Swayam ki khoj. Then find a way to constantly do seva of the world, to constantly do swadhyay. Only in that space, when that mind space and in that time space, will I do Shastra Adhyan. And for this inquiry of the Lord, we need two things. Two factors must be present in our life to be able to truly do this Brahma inquiry. Once we have those first two, right? One is Shastra Adhyan. Because Shastra, the Vedas, the Upanishads, the Gita, the various Shastras in our life, they are the ones that will teach us about it and talk to us and give us the path. Shastra Adhyan. And second, Guru. Because all these Shastras are Guru Gamya. Without Guru, you will not really understand. If you try and first, if you don't read Shastras, or if you read Shastras on your own without being guided by the right life forces around you, what happens is that you will develop your own notion of God. And that your own notion of God, which would start off as like, oh, there is this Narayan sitting in Vaikunt, there is Shiva sitting on Mount Kailash, right? All those notions, they are great, right? That's what we say that in the first step, you do that. But that's when you're in LKG, right? You start off with that notion. Great, it's fantastic. That's the starting point. You cannot die with that notion, right? It's only the starting point. Eventually, you have to inquire deeply into the nature of God and start to understand how the moment you have created that form is important, but that form is limited. Bhagwanji is not limited. It has no boundaries. What does it even mean that you have something which is absolute, which has no start, no end, never, no beginning, does not decay? What does it even mean? That inquiry will come through reading of Shastras and through having the right guidance of the Guru. And when you have the right guidance of Guru, it means that you will surrender your will to the will of the Guru. And then you stop questioning, why should I do this? Why should I not do that? Why are you telling me to do this? My brain tells me I don't need to do this. Right? You surrender your will to that of Guru and you start to do what Guru has told you to do, which then creates those situations which will push the capabilities of mind constantly outwards and outwards. It will cause expansion of your mind. And as your mind expands, you will start to understand the true nature of the Brahma. Okay. So
So-
this is how we progress and how we get out of the bondage.
So, in this particular shloka, the most important thing for us to reflect upon and to think about is non-involvement. Okay.
Which is the first one, right? The reduce your dependence.
So the vairagya, the non-involvement. Now, I can tell you this, all of us have practiced this in our lives. And we've experienced this in our lives. We just don't do it on a regular enough basis. All right. Right now is the flavor of Olympics that is happening, right? There are all sorts of athletes, all sorts of sports people. If you watch Olympics, right, you will see how athletes for a gold medal match, right, or talk about shooting, for example, in a, they are all shooting like the target is so big, the size of this, right, and then the pinpoint is here. They're all in a difference of a width of a hair, correct? The winner and the loser. And when they're shooting, if one shot goes wrong, the very next shot that the person has to take, they have to let go of the previous shot. That is non-involvement. They have to take that shot without worrying about the goal. That is non-involvement. Sports people, if you read about it, and I've talked about it in the past, they do it exceptionally well. And then sports is called being in the zone, where you do the task because you're happy to do the task. The moment you get attached to the outcome, you lose. Rag Dvesh enters. Non-involvement is not participating in the game. It's not about being the audience. It's about playing the game, but without rag and dvesh, without likes and dislikes, without expectation. That is such a simple thing for us to understand. And if we can reflect on how to bring this into all aspects of our life, then we would have brought Vairagya in. I'll also say this, Tuvina has mentioned this earlier in the class. Being non-involved in life when we start practicing it on a daily basis is like standing on tiptoes. You will do it for a few minutes, you'll do it for a couple of tasks, and then you'll fall back. And that's okay. Go back again. Go back again. Till that's the cycle of us strengthening the muscle to be completely non-involved. Right? So pick tasks that you think you can start with, where you're just happy to do the task as seva, not for expectation, not for adulation, not because you like it or don't like it, just as seva, and just practice it, do it. That is the most important way for us to bring in our spiritual growth and experience what Tuna is saying, the axe with the tree. Yeah, I think we should.
So we'll close the class now and we'll take the takeaways.
I'll go first. So, couple of things that hit me strong today. Essentially, is the change is the only thing that is not changing, right? Like that's a people tree example. Even though the earth is constantly moving, we are not observing it as consciously. And if we have to cut the tree of cycle, then we'll have to have the knowledge and resolute for the same to make sure that we are that's how we attain part of attaining the moksha, the flow of attaining the moksha. It's the takeaway.
Absolutely. Actually, the more, even in science, right, the more they try and understand the nature of this world, right, the deeper they go, the moment they think, oh, they've got the truth, right? We've got that smallest particle which forms everything else. They find, oh, even this I can't catch hold of, right? And we went from Newtonian physics to quantum physics. From quantum physics, also we went down further down, and they said, oh, we found the God particles, etc. But ultimately, what was finally realized, or at least at this point of time where the science is, they think that there is no certainty in this world, right? And that's how the uncertainty principle came about. When when they realize that everything is energy instead of matter, and they try to like pinpoint even that, they realize that they can't pinpoint anything. The only certainty in this world is that there is uncertainty in this world. With no certainty can you point to anything. No energy, no point. At all points of time, things are changing. The moment you think you've got something, it's already changed. That was the uncertainty principle that was created. The more, the deeper they went, and that shows the impermanence of this world. You cannot hold on to it. You cannot depend on it.
Okay, I'll share. So first of all, the analogy of tree is very apt here. We can visualize it properly, and because we see trees everywhere, it's around us. We see old leaves falling and new leaves coming. So this analogy is really good. And um, what we talked about in this shloka 3 and 4, the three things which you mentioned, um, I I think those are the most important things which we have been talking until now, like being dependent on God and accept the dualities, like both of them as God's prasad. And then inquiry of the self, which really that is going to lead us like to the wisdom and all. So I had one question that first of all, when you said there is no beginning, we don't know the beginning. So does that mean that like to know, to not to know, but if like how our first life would have been, what does that mean? There were no karmas in our first life, the bad or good karmas from the previous life, because it was the first life. So there's no answer to that, right? And okay.
No answer. There is no answer to that because there is no beginning.
Hmm.
There is no beginning. Bhagwanji has no beginning. There is no way for us to go back and inquire into when he started off or what started him. Similarly, when he has no beginning, his Maya has no beginning. There is no answer. It's a rabbit hole in which every guru will tell you, don't go down this rabbit hole, you'll get nowhere.
Okay. And then when you said about being equanimous in dualities, like accept both as God's prasad. So I mean, when there is scarcity, yes, we trust in God, and we believe that his hand is there with us, and he's helping us, he's giving us the resources to go through it. That is okay. But when there's plenty, the mind always worries, right? That okay, now everything is plenty, but then the time will come when this, like when scarcity will come. So how to like stop those worries, or because the mind want to protect, like we want to protect ourselves when the scarcity comes. So we think that what can we do to avoid it or be safe from it or go through it like properly. So how to stay during that time?
So when there is time of plenty, okay, let me give an example of a farmer who's harvesting, right? You harvest your crop. Now there is time of plenty. You harvest your rice once, and then it has to last your entire year till you harvest your next crop. What Gita says is that um, in this time of plenty, first of all, remember that this crop has been given by Bhagwanji. So thank you very much. I did all the work that Bhagwanji told me to do. I did the crops, I did the water, I did whatever had to be done. Ultimately, it could still have been destroyed, right? Because of my product. Locusts could have come, insects could have come, worms, whatever. Rain may not have happened, there may have been a drought, anything could have happened. Bhagwanji pulled all of this together to bring this crop to me. So thank you very much. Now I will do what is needed. I will cut the crop because that's my karma. I have to do that karma, right? I will cut the crop. I will store it in a proper warehouse. I will take all the precautions to store it so that it lasts me through the year. But if it gets destroyed, tomorrow scarcity comes. That is also Bhagwanji ka prasad. So it is not as if like you will not do the work, but you are not constantly worrying about it. You're not traumatizing yourself to think about, I never want this period of plenty to end. I will do what is needed. I will share my plentifulness with others. But after that, the calmness, the time that I have spent right now, I don't have to worry about foraging for food. I just have to go to my warehouse, get the food and cook it, right? So I have more time on my hands. What do I do with that extra time now? Do I use that extra time to worry about how to do something else to continue this place of plenty? or after I have done the duties of life, then I will go and spend the rest of the time in doing Brahma Vichar. So in times of plenty, never forget that this time of plenty has come from Bhagwan Ji, and that I am part of this transient world. Scarcity will come no matter what I do or don't do. At some point of time, it will come as a part of my prarabdha. I will do what is needed at this point of time, but not be attached to it. So not be traumatized when this goes. The day comes, day ke baad night aayegi hi aayegi, rule of the nature in some form. Night ke baad day aayega hi aayega, rule of the nature. So I will not be attached to day. I will not be attached to night. When day comes, I'll enjoy day. When night comes, I will enjoy night. It has both pros and cons. It has beauty, it has ugliness, both. Day will have heat to it, but it will also have beautiful light to it, in which I will see other beauties. Night has its own beauty, it has its own coolness, and it has its own negatives, right? I will enjoy all the seasons that the life has to show me, and I'll be happy in all of them. It's an internal state of mind. And use the time and energy, and the time and energy I spend in worrying about future. Instead of that, I will stay in my present and use that time to do more Shastra Adhyan. I will use more time to do my Swadhyay. I will do more time and energy spent on making sure that every karma I do, I don't create bandhan out of it. That all my actions and all my thoughts, all my emotions are as per the scriptures. Just so that I'm getting closer and closer to Bhagwan Ji, because that's my only ultimate aim of life. That's the only goal of life. And use that time to strengthen the desire for God further. Make sense? Rather than doing, क्या कहते हैं उसको, भोग. Use that time for yoga rather than bhog. And always remember here, time, you prepare for the difficult times in your good times. So prepare for the battle in the time of peace. The more adhyan, the more swadhyay you will do in the times of peace, the stronger you will be in the times of battle. And then you will not get swayed by the difficult situations that will take you away from the right path in those difficult times. You'll still stay your course. Your mind will not get clouded. Make sense? The exact thing that he says, na Kabira, कि दुख में सुमिरन सब करें, which is what you were saying, right? कि दुख में तो हम लोग भगवान जी को बहुत याद करते हैं. दुख में सुमिरन सब करें, सुख में करे ना कोई. People forget भगवान जी. उस टाइम पे पूरी ईगो आ जाती है. बुरा प्रॉब्लम आया तो भगवान जी ने कर दिया ये. अच्छा आया, ये सब मैंने किया. So I deserve it. So I must enjoy it. I must enjoy the fruits of my labor, right? सुख में सुमिरन कर, दुख में सुमिरन सब करे, सुख में करे ना कोई. जो सुख में सुमिरन करे तो दुख काहे को होए. There will be no dukh if you're all remembering God even in sukh. Because this is also Bhagwan Ji ka given. So then why do I have to worry about holding on to it? It's my ego that causes me to want to hold on to it. Because my ego is that limited thing, no? So I want to create more I-ness, minus. Ego creates I-ness and minus. When I'm always remembering God and I'm submerging my will to Bhagwan Ji, then there is no minus. मेरे पास नहीं है तो किसी और के पास होगा. I don't have those limitations कि मेरे पास कितना हो. There is no concept of holding then anymore. आएगा, जो आया है वो जाएगा. कभी ना कभी किसी ना किसी फॉर्म. Thank you.
I can go next. So I think the key takeaway is like it's a reiteration of whatever we have learned so far. So there is nothing, the concept is explained in another analogy, which is in the form of people tree. And the key is also the non-involvement, which is non-involvement, accepting the dualities of life, which is, I think it's just what we've been learning over so many, chapters. But I just had a query that when you said that, no need to go to an astrologer and this and that, but it is also part and something that is written in the Shastras, right? Like astrology is also a science. And it also helps people in difficulties, whatever situation or the stars. So how is this which is also written in Vedas and all this, is like, should not be, it's in help, which is a science which is given, then why should not one take help of it? I mean, accepting is one thing, but if there is that can be taken, even when you're sick, you take some help, right?
Vedas are uh, Vedas are a way of life, right? And they describe various types of karma that you should do in every situation in life, right? So you do this, you will get that, you do that, blah, 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 and this is the right way to live life. The problem is that we live life in a very non-scriptural manner all through. And then when difficulties fall, then we run to Vedas to find how can I get out of that difficulty. That is what is being referred to. If you live your life as per Vedas throughout, that's not an issue. What happens is कि यार, I will do whatever I want. Right? Vedas will prescribe certain niyam and yam so that you don't keep falling sick all the time. What happens is that we'll do everything wrong. We will not adhere to those yam and niyam. We will not do exercise. We will not do any of that. And then that will cause problems to us. That then we'll run. Then constantly allopathy, Ayurveda, then suddenly, I will develop that sense of like, so what is being said is here, ye mat karo ki pure, like, and then every small thing happens. Now, some small issue has happened. Now I run to an astrologer. Please help me solve this problem. Please help me solve this problem. Okay. Yes, when there is big difficulty, go try and find this thing. But in every small little thing, you're trying to find others to like help you solve is an issue.
So
Like,
the thing with astrologer also is the more that you engage, you have to. Most people use it as a cheat code, right? And a cheat code to win in sansar.
correct.
That's how they're using the scriptures. That's how they're using everything. And you and I both would probably have experience of godmen who do that, and we're like, they ruin not only sansar, they also ruin the scriptures, right? So there is no harm in doing any of this, doing it with the right purpose and bhav,
Correct.
which means you're using astrology or you're using your scriptures to attain your ultimate goal of self-realization, of moksha. Now, if you're using astrology for that purpose, it would speak and it would define its outcome very differently than using it as a cheat code to win in samsara.
Essentially exactly what Avina said, very, very well said. Like otherwise what we are trying to do is we are trying to use God ki Vani, we are trying to use Bhagwan ji to get to Sansar. And our goal is actually ulta. Use Sansar to get to Bhagwan ji. हम लोग कॉन्स्टेंटली उल्टा काम करते हैं, उल्टा पूजा भी करेंगे भगवान जी से टू गेट संसार. You are my slave. Now you tell me, and then we try bribe him also. You do this for me, get me this, then I'll do this for you. As if he needs all that things, right? That is what is being frowned upon. Because then you are only getting, that's all karm kand, no? Then that is sakam karm. Sakam karm say, how will you get out of this sukhalaya? You will get further suffering. Either you will suffer in the time of plenty, because now you're afraid that this plenty will sometime go away. How do I preserve it? You will suffer in the time of scarcity, because now there's scarcity, there is pain, and then you will suffer with that pain. So there is constant suffering when you do sakam karma. When you don't do sakam karma, you're doing nishkam karma, then you're not worried about the results. You will do your duty, and you will have plenty of time. You will have plenty of space in your mind to devote yourself to the inquiry of the Lord, which will get you the eventual gap. Then
Yeah, what my takeaway is that our we try to be non-involved, but it ends up being selective based on our preferences. Okay, this is suiting me, so I'll be non-involved here. This doesn't, sorry, and this is working out convenient for me, or this makes me feel better being not involved. So that's where the work lies, I suppose, to be consciously non-involved in everything.
The,
So
the
that's
day
my
you can,
takeaway here. Yeah.
the day you can do it as a parent to your child, that's when you won. That's what I'll say.
It's the, I know.
So
I know.
keep
This
trying.
is where our work is. Yeah, being conscious every time and trying to. It's really hard. Everything, all the VVGPs, whatever people talking to you, people, the way. Sorry, oh God, a mess. The environment you're in, so you keep getting pulled into different things. So yeah, that's where the whole thing lies,
Absolutely. And I think that's something that
I
we talk
suppose.
about
And
in class, right? That this uh, the world is the Bhagwanji ki Maya is so strong and so glamorous. It is impossible. It's not difficult. It is impossible for us to get out of it
possible.
without taking Bhagwanji's Sharan. We cannot do it. Only He can do it. Only His grace can do it. So we have to constantly ask for His grace and constantly devote ourselves, and then He will pull us out. So our job is not to pull ourselves out of this Maya. Our job is to do Sharanagati. We have to take Sharanagati. We have to take His Sharan. We have to just dedicate ourselves to Him. That's all that we need to do. Then He will pull us out.
To keep that, always remember that. That's the thing. Not to forget that. Getting involved. Thank you.
Thanks.
Those are shlokas.
We'll do closing shlokas now.
Om Sarvesham
स्वस्तिर्भवतु सर्वेषां शान्तिर्भवतु सर्वेषां पूर्णं भवतु सर्वेषां मङ्गलं भवतु
Om
सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत् ॐ असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्योर्मा अमृतं गमय ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः ॐ पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः ॐ
Narayan, Narayan,
Narayan,
everyone.
Narayan, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I think Rishabh wants to rejoin the class.